welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking about this month that is just started. It seems like it's going to be a crazy one, so get you updated with everything that can happen there. Then we're going to get you updated on Notre Dame and all of their status. A lot of people questioning whether or not they're going to join a conference in the next little bit. We got some answers to that by way of their AD this week. And then college football is looking at the hip drop tackle. They have decided to table the discussion for the time being while the NFL kind of figures out what that looks like at the next level. So a lot going on there, and we'll break into that, and I'll give you my opinion on that rule in general. And then we have another Good Vibes Monday for you, and today we're going to talk about teams that can make their way into the playoff picture, playing the football they've been playing for a long time. Obviously, more places to go around, more ability for these 10-2, 11-1, or even 9-3 teams to make it into the playoff and possibly make a run. So we'll break down all of those teams. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question or comment on the screen and I can see it, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the link at the bottom of the screen, GSMCPodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to see your question on the screen. We can have a fun back and forth and definitely make this a more interactive show. So definitely use that link. Again, it's GSMCPodcast.net. But let's jump right in. April is a month that a lot of people don't associate with college football. It's all about, ending of March Madness, getting into baseball season, talking about the NBA season wrapping up and getting into playoffs there. But college football is dominating a lot of the news right now for various reasons, a lot of them not so great, and it seems like April might be continuing that. We're about 152 days away from week one. Well, exactly 152 days away from week one. So we're very far from actual football being played. Obviously, spring games are coming down the barrel here pretty soon, but tons of stuff is going on around the sport that has nothing to do with football. So just to give you an update of where we are with everything and what could kind of happen throughout this month, I wanted to break down all of this because I have a feeling this month could be a future-defining month in a lot of ways for college football as a whole and maybe even college sports as a whole. So let's start with something that everyone's talking about right now, conference realignment with the ACC in particular. So the ACC is at the center of conference realignment this time around after, the Pac-12 was the center one time and then the SEC and the Big 12 the other. But they're in the center of the conversation for all the wrong reasons. Obviously, 4 lawsuits on their hands, 2 countersuits against Clemson and Florida State, and then obviously Clemson and Florida State have sued them to get out of their grant of rights. Different kind of lawsuits, kind of attacking from 2 different angles, which I tend to believe is the right attack if you're working as a team in the ACC, which it seems to be there's some sort of coordinated attack going on. I think it's a great idea to make sure that these cases are as different as possible because then you can't put them all under the same umbrella and then the ACC can't tie different arguments to this or the same arguments to different cases. So it definitely does help the way that Florida State and Clemson have set this up. And obviously, as we've talked about a lot, North Carolina, Virginia, and Miami, although they have some interesting comments from their AD, I believe, this past week that we should get to probably tomorrow. Maybe we'll jump into that. And so there are teams watching from the outside, watching this very closely, seeing if there's any movement one way or the other. And I think there will be a lot of answers this month. ACC and Florida State cases have started to kind of gain a little bit of traction. Some answers have been made about some different aspects of that court case, but the big question is, where are you going to try these cases? Where are these cases going to be in front of a judge? Because obviously Florida State wants theirs in Florida, Clemson wants theirs in South Carolina, and the ACC wants both of these in North Carolina. Just because that's home base, you don't want any Florida State fan walking up to the podium and being the judge presiding over those discussions. So it makes sense from both perspectives why you'd want it on your home turf. But that's been the big holdup right now. They're still trying to figure that out, still trying to come to an agreement there. And it'll be really interesting to see what that is, because I think that'll be kind of a definer for how this case might go. Obviously, getting it in North Carolina, the ACC would feel very good about their opportunity to get as much money out of Florida State and Clemson as possible, because at the end of the day, I think that's the ultimate goal here. They're pretty much out of the conference already, or they've made that decision for themselves, and now it's about just preserving this as much as you can. So getting this tried in North Carolina is going to be huge for the ACC, and I think this could be the month that we figure all that out, and then a lot of dominoes will start to fall in regards to those court cases, and kind of how the ACC is looking after this month will be a very interesting thing to see. And then let's talk about the thing that I tend to think is going to be a bigger part of this month. A lot of people tend to think it's going to be a bigger part of this month. The transfer portal and NIL. There has been a lot of conversation around them going into this offseason. There have been, obviously, the court case between the NCAA and Tennessee opened the door for NIL to kind of be the Wild West again. That obviously opens the door for the transfer portal to be a little bit more crazy, because these two things kind of go hand in hand. And there has been tons of people across the recruiting industry, including Shannon Terry, who is kind of like the godfather of recruiting rankings, where he's the CEO of On3 right now. He was the CEO and founder of On3, was the head of 247 Sports, so he's all over the place. He is as plugged as anyone can possibly be in the recruiting world, and that includes transfer portals. So he's saying it's going to be a crazy wave. I told a story last week from the Josh Pate show, actually, but I'll share it again here, that he was talking to someone that is involved with a program around the country, and this person had said that an entire position group on their team, they were fully under the impression that they would not be on the team after the spring. And that's something that's not necessarily as crazy as it might seem. Obviously, some of these players make their decision early on in spring and just kind of wait for that late window. We've already seen Caden Proctor do that. Jacoby Matthews, another one at Texas A&M. But the crazy part about this story is they know exactly who they're going to go after to replace all of the kids that are walking out the door. So this obviously is unprecedented in a lot of ways. Obviously, some of this stuff might have been happening behind closed doors. Some of this stuff might have been happening without us knowing it. But at the end of the day, this is the first time that I've heard something that has been so aggressively in the direction that a lot of people are worried about, right? Everyone's worried about this transfer portal becoming kind of a free-for-all and a Wild West type setup, and this seems to be as Wild West as it gets, right? Being able to not only know what the number of people that are leaving your program, them being a lot of people, it seems like, and knowing exactly who you're going to bring in that are already on other programs and other rosters is quite the thing. And it's something that we did not have to deal with even a couple of years ago when there was transfer portal rules and there were certain things in place. But right now we are in a no direction, no guidelines, no rules type of era when it comes to the transfer portal and NIL in particular. So this is going to be really weird. Every single team in the country is preparing for this. Every single team in the country has a full understanding of what this could look like and how it's going to affect them. But there's going to be a ton that are still blindsided because there are kids, I'm sure, that have not made up their mind on what they want to do after the spring, because spring games have yet to happen for a lot of these teams. So decisions are going to be made here pretty soon, and it'll be interesting to see how many kids kind of come out of the woodwork that you're not expecting, how many kids make total sense. But I think there's going to be a couple that really open people's eyes and really shock some people, including me. I'm sure there's some guys out there that are planning on finding a new place to play that I have no expectation to do that. So it'll be really interesting to see all this kind of unfold. And as you remember in 2021, when all of the transfer portal stuff was kind of starting and everything was getting a little bit crazy, Pat Narduzzi had a very aggressive press conference going at Lincoln Riley and USC for their recruiting tactics when it came to Jordan Addison, who obviously was a remarkable receiver coming off a Biletnikoff season, was a huge reason why Caleb Williams was so successful in his Heisman year. And it's one of those things that you feel like one of those press conferences is coming. You feel like there's going to be some coach that's in front of a podium at the end of this month saying, my kids, I can't do this anymore, or just like, the situation that we are currently under is just not sustainable in any form or fashion. So I could see a flurry of those press conferences coming, because I think there are a lot of coaches that, while they know what's coming, while they understand that the transfer portal is an unforgiving thing and it's all over the place right now, there's still a lot of unknown, and you still don't really know what's going on in these kids' heads. So there's going to be some coaches that are blindsided. There's going to be coaches that are very angry, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got a Narduzzi-esque press conference at some point during this month calling out another coach, maybe by name, probably not by name, because that's kind of how this usually works. But I think it's going to be a really interesting month, and the transfer portal, we've been looking at it for a really long time, just waiting for that moment, I guess, that flurry of transfer portal kids that bring everyone's attention to what the actual issue with this is. And it's happened in, spurts. There's been individual circumstances. I mean, Caden Proctor is the most recent one, where he transfers to Iowa for a whole of about 15 minutes and then finds his way back to Alabama. I think these things have happened in spurts. They've happened in individual circumstances spread throughout the past couple of years, but there hasn't been an onslaught all at the same time. There hasn't been this remarkable turn, and there's been some crazy transfer portal windows. There's no doubt about that. This past one was absolutely wild, with tons of guys going all over the place, but you kind of expect that at the end of the season, and with a lot of things changing, it makes sense that that would be a crazy portal time. April is not necessarily the month that everyone pegged to be the crazy portal, but it seems like it's going to be. And it'll be interesting to see who gets hit the hardest. You have to assume that the big boys on campus, the Georgias, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, all those teams will benefit, and the lower tier teams will probably be the ones taken advantage of. But I guess you never know until stuff happens. But I do think this is going to be an absolutely crazy month. And I think it kind of needs to be. Not necessarily in the sense that you want these kids bouncing all over the place and having no idea of what your team's roster looks like at the time being. But at the end of the day, the transfer portal has been waiting for this moment where everyone turns to it and says, okay, this is a problem. It's always been about player empowerment, and I'm all for that. But it's gotten to a point where it's becoming a little more dangerous for the players than becoming player empowerment. So there has to be a big tsunami that kind of brings everyone's attention to the same thing and gets everyone in the room talking about this in the same light. And I think this month could very well be it. I think there's going to be a number of examples of kids making decisions for maybe the wrong reasons, or maybe just making them fairly quickly when they could have taken a little bit more time. I think there's going to be a number of examples that we will definitely get into throughout the month of kids maybe making a mistake in this portal, and you'll see it time and again, and you'll see tons of big time kids finding new places to play. And hopefully, at the very least, that this brings some type of structure, that there's some type of group in the background that is waiting for this avalanche, so everyone's on the same page and we can finally move forward and figure out what the next step is for the transfer portal and NIL, because I think we all agree that this cannot be the system going forward. This can't be the system as we go on for the next 5-10 years, because then a lot of kids are going to get left by the wayside. So you need that moment. You need that big event that everyone looks at and says, okay, this is a problem for the sport. Let's get this under control. And I think this month could be it in the transfer portal. So I guess the best way to put it is buckle up, because there's going to be some things happening throughout this month that are not going to necessarily improve your enthusiasm for college football and the future of it. But I think in the long term, it could be a good thing. I think there's fear in the short term, and there's definitely going to be some weird things happening in the short term, but I think in the long term, it'll at the very least create change where there's absolutely needed change in the transfer portal and the NIL discussion. So it'll be interesting to see all of this unfold. I think this month could be as big a month as there's been in college football in a really long time in terms of what the future of it looks like. So we'll keep you updated, obviously, with everything as it happens, new transfers and all of that type of stuff. But buckle up, because I think this month is going to be a little bit off the walls, definitely comparative to other Aprils in the past. But we're going to take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Notre Dame and their possibly joining a conference, possibly staying independent. There's been a lot of conversation about that, so we will break that down right after this.